Good evening, and you're very welcome to our fifth talk this week on our as part of our My 15 Minutes campaign, which is all about building positive mental health into your daily life. And tonight we're absolutely thrilled to welcome Michael Stafford here. Michael is a friend of mine, a coach, and a president of the Irish Coaching Federation, and an all-around good guy. And he's going to talk to us about his tips on coping in current circumstances, coping with anxiety, and basically living your best life. So, Michael, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for coming on board.
Thank you, Max, but delighted to be invited.
We're delighted to have you. Can you give us a little bit of background on yourself before we start, Michael?
Yeah, okay, I'll keep it short and sweet. So my name is Michael Stafford, as Max said. I have my own company called The Chapter Coach, and I work with clients, coaching them around leadership, executive presence, career transition, and that space. But I suppose one of the things that I've always been passionate about is the mental health field. And today, this evening, I suppose, been delighted to come here today to talk to you about tips for coping and what I have seen being a support line volunteer with Aware and what I'm seeing in the general public ever since COVID came in. And I think it's a very relevant theme to be discussing, especially around World Suicide Prevention Week.
Absolutely. So, Michael, if you were to meet somebody who was suffering with anxiety, I know myself, particularly at the start of this, you go back to March and you go back to the start of the pandemic, and everywhere you looked, it was COVID this, COVID that. And it was, there were really frightening videos and images coming in from Italy and from around the world. And my own anxiety went through the roof. I know that from a personal perspective. What would you say to somebody who is suffering with anxiety?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say to everybody anybody that's in this place is, maybe we always have to check in to see what's the reality here. Is it anxiety or is it something else? So anxiety can be thrown around, and even the word depression can be thrown around an awful lot. So it's always about, first of all, obtaining what we call a medical diagnosis. At least have that chat. And in that space, I would always say to somebody, yes, I'm here to support you. I'm here to listen to you. But have you spoken to a medical professional in this space yet? Have you spoken to your GP? And Mags, you'd be surprised the amount of people go, oh, I never thought I could speak to my GP about this. So I would always say to them, speak to your GP about it first and see what options are available. For some people, it may be that they need medication, and for other people, it may be that they just need professional help. And your doctor or your GP will hopefully be able to guide you in the direction that's local supports that are available to you. Having said that, after that, I would always ask them, what are you doing? What is your day looking like? What's filling your bucket? What's draining your energy? What is changing in your life that you feel that you're not having control over? Anxiety can lead to physical ailments, which usually then become the spotters, so to speak. So that's what someone go, oh, I have a pain in my chest. I wonder if it's anxiety. I wonder if it's this. And it's really getting to the nuts and bolts of, well, what is it? What is it that we're dealing with? And there's plenty of tips for coping in that space.
Okay, that makes sense. And in your work, would you come across people who are suffering with anxiety, or maybe have to support people who are suffering with anxiety?
Oh God, yeah, Mags, and it's growing. I'd love to know some of the statistics around this. I think everybody lives with anxiety and lives with an element of, there's a saying that we say, we don't suffer with mental health, you live with mental health. Okay. It's where I suppose it's a two-pronged approach. When you come from the mentality that you're suffering from mental health, you will suffer from it. When you come from the mentality that you're living with mental health or living with anxiety, what you try to do then is manage it. Because there's going to
switch your mindset. Sorry, Michael, for cutting across you, but how do you switch your mindset?
I always go back to saying, okay, so what's happening? I think you need to get a reality check. Before you can switch your mindset, you need to know where you are. So what I would find with people, I'd say, what's changed for you? What are you dealing with? So for example, COVID-19. So, you know, for COVID-19, people were missing, like initially people loved going to the office or being at home. Now people want to kind of go back to the office because what are they missing? They're missing that human connection, even over Zoom, Mags, or even over Facebook Lives or texting or all of that. We're missing hugging. We're missing seeing people. And that's something that can have an impact on somebody's mindset, but they may not know that. They may just think, oh, as I said before, you know, we're all in the same storm. We're not necessarily all in the same boat. So what works for one person might not work for another. So that's why when you say shift your mindset, I could give you 6 or 7 tips for coping and how to shift your mindset, shift your mindset, but it mightn't actually work for you. You need to figure out what works for you in that space. But one of the great ways of remembering or trying to shift into a more positive mindset is think about what gives you energy and what fills your bucket, what you enjoy doing, even if it's only one thing, and start with that. So if you enjoy walking or exercising and you look and say to yourself, I'm not feeling great, maybe it's that you're not exercising as often as you were. And all of a sudden, that is impacting on how you're feeling. So what we can change really quickly is our behavior. And there's this saying, if the worse I feel, the less I do, and the less I do, the worse I feel. So this vicious cycle.
Okay,
But
yeah.
you can switch that around. Like I cannot say to you, Mags, you're supposed to think this way, or your thoughts are not real, because they're your thoughts. Your feelings are your feelings. But what you can do is change your behavior. So if you think about it in that space, choosing one thing that you might be able to do differently and then taking it from there. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. And what would you say to somebody who is trying to support somebody who might be struggling in that way? And you know, you say take that small step, but how would you, if you're the person who's would say I'm feeling very anxious, or I'm getting less and less done, I'm feeling unproductive, and I'm here and Seamus, my husband, wants to support me. How would he go about that if I don't have the energy to try and do something about it myself?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mags, and it's very relevant, and it's one that I hear an awful lot. And one of the things, and you'll probably laugh about this, but the first thing I would ask Seamus is, how is he?
Okay.
Because we sometimes go straight into fixing the other person or trying to help the other person, but you always have to look after your own oxygen mask first. So I would say to Seamus, what are you noticing? What can you do to support? Does the person need time? But before I would say all that, I would say, how are you? Because usually they're frustrated or they're finding it difficult, but no one is asking them how they feel, because they're ringing or they're talking to you about somebody else.
Mm.
And when you do that, then the person gets to pause and go, well, you know what, I'm finding this, or, you know, and you get that kind of release because they've been asked this question. And then you start exploring options that will work together, because that person, your loved one, your closest person, they usually know you, or we hope they do. They know you the best. Okay? So sometimes the people closest to you can be the causes of your anxiety, but they don't know that, you know. So I suppose what I like about checking in is we build that reality there, or we build that plan together with the person. Because I would say, so say for example, if it was you, Mags, what does Mags usually like doing? What are you noticing about the change in behavior? When has this started? And try to identify when it crept up. And then it might be, because Seamus, for example, or JR in my case, might turn around and say, you're not the same since last week. And I might go, well, you know what happened last week, this. But they didn't know that. All of a sudden, they've seen a shift in me. So building that communication piece together is very important. And telling the person that is trying to support them that maybe sometimes you're not the best person to do it. Maybe you need to take a step back. Maybe you need to just leave some information on the kitchen table. It might be that the person will just read it in their own time.
Okay. That's interesting. What you say about sometimes you're not the right person. So when you might be helping somebody to support somebody else, that might be around, well, how do they get support themselves? Um,
Absolutely. And also, you know, the way you might have conversations on, you need to do this, or why don't you try this? And it's all about it, you know, we're all good people. We have an intention to try and help people, but sometimes that's the worst thing you can say to somebody who is living or managing their anxiety, because it's not necessarily about fixing the problem. What I hear an awful lot of clients say is they may say, I just want them to say to me, I get it or I don't get it. It's okay. I'm here with you, but I don't have the fix.
okay, yeah. Yeah, so it's about being heard. And it's interesting that you say that, because what you're saying essentially is that, like, coaching is about asking questions, isn't it? About understanding a situation. So it's essentially those skills, is it, that you're bringing in? Would you have any tips for people in how to, like, my tendency, I know personally, I will jump and try and fix. I'm a bottle fix it kind of person. It's just what I naturally do. How would you talk to me? How would you tell me to stop and sit back and think of it? What would you
I'd
have any advice?
I'd probably say to you what you just said to yourself. How would you tell me to stop? I wouldn't tell you to stop. I'd say, what would you
Good point.
know you do well? But what I would say to you is, I might say, so what about seeing it from another angle? What would you do in this space? Or sometimes you might give a story of another client. Now, and I'm talking private and confidentially, there's no names or anything being told here,
Sure.
but the story of that client and what they did or what worked for somebody else, and try to shift the person's perspective and see it from a different lens. And sometimes then that awareness comes back and they go, right, okay. Because what you really want them to get to by asking the questions is a place where they feel, okay, okay. And they get a new sense of perspective, I suppose is the word again.
Okay. Okay. And is there anything in particular that you recommend that people build into their lives? As I've said at the beginning, our campaign is all around this idea of my 15 minutes and building in some time for yourself. Is there any tips that you have around that?
Mags, there's loads, but and as I said at the beginning, it's about finding what works for you. So we
Okay.
know that, for example, eating a balanced diet is paramount to mental and physical well-being. Okay, but not only eating a balanced diet, be mindful of when you're eating,
Okay.
what you're, you know, if you like your coffee, but you're having it before you go to bed, you're not going to sleep well. But if you want to still have your coffee because that's a habit that you enjoy, have decaffeinated coffee. Think of alternatives all the time. Looking at, say, exercising. We've had this conversation before. I don't necessarily want to exercise, but I know when I've exercised and after it, I feel better.
Okay.
When I look at, say, your mental health in terms of, say, the phone, putting your phone away, not bringing your phone up to bed with you. It tends to be the first thing we check in the morning and the last thing we check at night. And one of the things that I found very useful from a client of mine last year was he stopped actually bringing the phone to bed and checking the phone in the morning. So she got up in the morning time, went about her routine, her 15 minutes of mindfulness or journaling, and then faced the day. So she was in control as opposed to the day controlling her and impacting on her thoughts straight away.
Okay, that's an interesting one. That's one I probably need to take on board myself, Michael. Yeah. Okay, so look, we're coming to the end of our chat. Is there anything just before we go that you would like to just reinforce for people?
Yeah, I suppose reinforcing the most important thing is you're not alone. You may need alone time, but be mindful of how much alone time you're having. If you're feeling that you need assistance, reach out to family, reach out to friends, or if that doesn't work, reach out to your GP in a confidential space. Reach out to the Samaritans, Aware, PA to House, whatever works for you. The trained volunteers are there to support you in that space. and take each day as it comes, but also remember, be kind to yourself. That's the one thing I would ask everybody to be mindful of. Be kind to yourself and how you speak to yourself.
I think that's really good advice. Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate you giving up your time on a Friday evening. Much appreciated.
No problem at all, Max. Thank you very much.